Okay, there we go. And we're recording. So thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Jen Bentley. I'm the Alumni Engagement Officer for the Faculty of Health. I'd like to begin by just acknowledging that much of the work of the University of Waterloo takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldeman Tract, the land granted to 6 nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is centralized within our Indigenous Relations Office. We also are fortunate in the Faculty of Health to have our own Indigenous knowledge keeper, Elder Henry, with us, and he has been doing a lot of knowledge sharing, and there's been a lot of learning happening within the faculty and community events being hosted. So we were fortunate to have that happening within our faculty now as well. So I'm excited to welcome everyone to our final office hour of the spring term, today featuring alumna Rebecca Wong Kai Pun. And bringing back alumni to connect with our students is an important priority for the faculty, but also the university. We love to showcase our alumni as they help show students what's possible. The success that they've had and the stories that they share help shine a light on the path for students who might be wondering what their own futures might look like. So we are hosting these alumni office hours every term. If you have requests on any career paths that you'd like to see featured, please feel free to share those in the chat, or you can email me at any time at jennifer.bentley@uwaterloo.ca. So we've got a nice small group session today. In order to make the most of it, I'd like to invite the students who are here with us to turn on your camera if you're able to, just so that we can have a real personal conversation with Rebecca today. This will be a great opportunity for you to ask her your questions about speech pathology and learn what it's like to work in her career. With that, we'll also do some quick introductions of everyone in the group so that we can get an idea of what program you're from, as well as what year you're in. So Aisha, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Aisha. I'm working under Jen this term as a co-op student as the Alumni Advancement Assistant, and I'm going into my 3B term of Health Studies.
Thank you. And Bella, are you here and able to at least turn your mic on and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Bella. I am going into my 4th year of Rec and Leisure, but I'm currently working with a speech therapist, so I wanted to see some more about how to get in from Waterloo.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. And Persez?
Yep. Hey, my name is Persez, and I'm in my 3rd year of Therapeutic Recreation. So I'm kind of curious to see what to do. I noticed that some people do speech after OT or different branch out into different things. So that's why I kind of wanted to get a bit of insight into that today.
Great. Thanks so much. Well, this will be a really great opportunity for the two of you to ask any questions you have to Rebecca, since we have a nice small group today. And with that, I will let Rebecca introduce herself and tell her story from Waterloo to now.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. It's so fun to have the opportunity to chat about my journey because I think my experience at Waterloo did such a good job kind of building the foundation for my success and my unique approach as a speech language pathologist. So Bella and Persez, you mentioned that you're both Rec and Leisure students. And so I don't know if you might know this already, but I'm a Rec and Leisure grad, and I did both therapeutic rec and recreation business. And I also did co-op. So really my introduction to speech language pathology as a profession was at an alumni event, actually at BMH. We didn't do virtual events at that time, but they did have some alumni come in, and there was a speech language pathologist. And that was the first time I had even heard these words put together. And it was just an interesting moment. As you might also feel in your last or in your 4 years at Waterloo, that you just are thinking of all these possibilities. So it's great when you're being introduced to lots of different professions. So that was kind of in my head as something interesting. But obviously I was focused on schoolwork and co-ops. And then it wasn't until later that I did a co-op with Brain Injury Services as a therapeutic recreation co-op placement, where I was working with brain injury clients, and I was working on activities, exercises that were sent by their speech language pathologist. So my role was for this client was helping them essentially get the practice in. And again, that was a moment where I got to see a speech language pathologist treatment plan and an assessment report. And that was just a really great, again, kind of opening up my world to see that profession and what it looked like. And I got hooked. I was like, I think I would like to do this. And that's when I started doing some research, looking at the grad programs that for speech language pathology, and looking at all of the requirements and starting to fit in those requirements. How would they fit within the requirements requirements for my my time in the recreation department. And then I also noticed that in order to get into the speech language pathology master's programs at that time, you had to have volunteer experience. And so I started volunteering in the KW area while I was in my school terms. And I also did volunteer when I was on a work term in Hamilton. And again, like the more I volunteered, the more classes I took that were related to the field, the more I just realized like, no, I definitely want to do this. And then I began volunteering in other ways and kind of learning more. So like looking up information, taking a look at the licensing process, and really figuring out what I wanted to do. And so I applied to schools, and I actually, for some personal reasons, ended up going to school in Boston, Massachusetts. So I went to the Massachusetts General Hospital Institute, which is a really wonderful East Coast program. And I loved my time there. It was a great adventure living in Boston, exploring a new city. And it was a really fantastic program, which actually allowed me to do both the language piece of speech language pathology and also a big focus on the literacy piece of speech language pathology, which gave me a really unique perspective coming back to Canada after my program was done. So I came back to Canada and I worked in a couple different private practices in my first couple of years in Mississauga, Brampton, Hamilton, doing home visits primarily, as well as some clinic visits and daycare visits. And then I ended up spending 5 years as the speech language pathologist for the Six Nations Health Services, which is on the Six Nations territory near Brantford. And so I spent 5 years being the only SLP for the entire community, which included daycare, clinic visits, school visits, adult care, basically anyone in the community that needed speech language pathology from and wanted to access it through the Six Nations Health Center. That was me. And so it was a really interesting experience. It was a challenging experience in some ways because the caseloads were very high. So I had to do a lot of management of my caseload, but I also was joined by 2 communication disorder assistants. So if you're not aware of that profession, that's kind of like a physiotherapy assistant. You might be familiar with a PTA or an OTA, occupational therapy assistant. So very similar, they assist with therapy, and they wouldn't be assessing, but they would be providing therapy only. And they're very a big piece of a lot of rehab provision in hospitals, in children's treatment centers, as well as being part of school teams. So I was really fortunate to have that opportunity and to have 2 amazing CDAs And I really got to use a different way of my brain where I was also supervising and managing CDAs. Another beautiful thing that came out of my work at the Six Nations, in the Six Nations community, was a lot of learning around client-centeredness and what that really means, not this pretty picture that we can sometimes paint that kind of feels a little bit superficial, but really thinking about what that means and putting the client and their requests, their history, their family values, their community values first, and using our skills and knowledge to fit within their preferences and letting them lead the relationship. And so I was really lucky and fortunate to have that opportunity. I also got to learn some Cayuga and Mohawk language. I got a firsthand look at the resilience and strength of their community. And I feel like it grew me a lot as a person. I grew a lot as a person, and I also grew a lot as a speech language pathologist. And I'm very fortunate to still have a lot of the relationships that I had then with me still. I also had the opportunity there to work in an interdisciplinary team with occupational therapists, physiotherapists, behavior supports, early childhood educators, teachers. So that was also very influential on me. And I take a lot of the lessons learned from working with those other professions with me now. In that time, I had a child. I also then was pregnant with my second. And during my mat leave with my second, I chose to take a step back from Six Nations and start my own practice. There was a pandemic going on. You might have heard of it. And I was coming off my mat leave with my second and didn't really know what my daycare, childcare, and school situation would be for my children. And so I also really wanted to kind of be my own boss and take a step in creating my own practice. So in January of 2020, 2 months before everything kind of changed in March, I started my own practice. I started very slow, building my caseload 1 or 2 clients at a time. I was working around my husband's work from home schedule and my kids all being home in March, especially. So just building a client caseload over time. And right now, 2 years later, I am the proud owner of Bloom Speech Language Therapy, and I'm based in Burlington, Ontario. I see clients. I do have a clinic location. I work out of a pediatric physiotherapy clinic once a week. So I have a clinic location for clients, but I also do home visits the other 2 days a week that I see clients. So I do a mixture of home visits and clinic visits. I'm a pediatric focused with a real focus on client and family driven and client and family focused therapy, as well as play-based therapy. One last little note is that in just a couple weeks, I'll be running my first summer camp, which is a nature-based communication camp. Definitely always had an interest in nature and nature-based recreation based on my time at Waterloo. And then that's carried through and been even more supported with my time at Six Nations. And then I recently have been a supervisor for a McMaster research project focused on nature-based speech pathology. So this is kind of like my application of all of that knowledge, and I'm really excited to be implementing that in a couple weeks. That's it.
That's a lot. So much.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But thank you for sharing all that. That's very exciting about kind of everything coming together to then be running this camp. So I look forward to hearing more about that after the summer. But we will just change into Q&A now. So anyone who has any questions for Rebecca based on all of the great things we just heard and all of her different experiences, please feel free to either raise your hand and turn your mic on and ask the question, or we can also use the chat if people aren't able to come on. But yeah, we can have some great discussion and ask Rebecca all of your questions about, how to get to speech pathology from Waterloo. Persez, go ahead.
Hey, thanks for sharing, Rebecca. I had a quick question about your licensing. Is there anything you have to do to maintain it, like while you're practicing?
Yes, definitely. So speech pathology is licensed or regulated by provincial colleges.
Mhm.
So in Ontario, we're regulated by the Canadian Audiologists or Canadian Association of Speech Language Pathologists and Audiologists. I think I
Okay.
got that. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the Canadian one. So the Ontario one is CASLPO. If you want to ever look it up, it's CASLPO, CASLPO, and it's the Ontario College of Audiologists and Speech Language Pathologists. So we are regulated. We have to pay obviously like a yearly due, and we have to yearly, we have to make a goal. We have to basically make a statement that we've done certain things, also that we haven't done certain not so great things. And then we also have to set goals for the next year and then comment on what we've done to meet the goals from the past year. So for example, if I set up, and it has to be a certain amount of hours that you've put in to meeting those goals. So the idea of setting goals is so that you're not just picking up continuing ed hours randomly throughout the year, but you're mindfully putting your thoughts to, I'd like to develop my skills in supporting clients with stuttering, for example. And then you're setting that intention, you're going out and you're looking for development opportunities for in stuttering. And then you would comment and write in how many hours you put towards that. Yeah, does that answer your question, Persez?
Yeah. No, you got it. I was just wondering because I know in like other professions too, like OT and TR, they also have licensing. So I was just wondering what it would look like for SLP.
Yeah, they're very similar. It's all about like making sure that you're continuing to develop your skills. And it doesn't have to be that you go out and do a course. It can also be like, I read a research paper, that counts. I spoke to a colleague who has more experience and I learned from them. That kind of thing also would count towards hours. I think it's just about making sure you're like sharing that with the college. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There was a question submitted ahead of time, like in registration, that asked about what was the most challenging thing you encountered when going from undergrad to grad school?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I would say the most challenging thing would be getting the prerequisites in order to apply for grad school, because I did apply to Boston, like MGH in Boston, but I also did apply to like U of T and Western, and I didn't apply to Ottawa because that one's a French program and Mac's program didn't exist back in those days. So I definitely would recommend you look at each program and make a list of the prerequisites that each program has slightly different ones, possibly, depending if you're staying in province or going out of province. I found that one, as a double major therapeutic rec and rec business, I didn't have a lot of elective opportunities that were just free. So I was able to meet a lot of the requirements and prerequisites for grad program through some of my courses that were required or electives I had already taken because of especially the therapeutic recreation. But some specific ones like a linguistics course or a phonetics course, those were a bit trickier to fit in. I actually had to go out of my way to take some distance ed courses during some of my co-ops, so that one was a distance ed from Waterloo and one was a distance ed from another university, because Waterloo didn't offer the prerequisites that I needed. So I would definitely do your research early versus like maybe in your last term. It might be hard to get those prerequisites. But also know that you can be creative and flexible. And if you really want something, you can go out of your way to get it. So don't feel like you can't do speech pathology because Waterloo doesn't have the linguistics course you need. I went out of my way and I did distance ed learning while on my co-op. And then I was able to still graduate on time and also apply for the September after I graduated. So I was still able to kind of keep with the timeline I expected. I do know of other students who didn't quite decide they wanted to be an SLP until late in their student kind of career, or when they graduated, they decided and they didn't have the prerequisites. So they ended up taking like a gap year, working in the rehab world or volunteering with SLPs, and then taking their kind of courses during that time as well.
Thanks. Oh, Bella has a question. Go ahead.
That question was my like the question that Jennifer asked. I think I typed that question beforehand. But my other question was, so I've heard that when you apply, like the majority of like the people don't get in because the first thing they look at is just your marks. Is that true? Like, would you say like if you don't have like 90s, like you have no shot of getting in?
Well, I'm not part of the I've never been a part of the teams that decide on who gets into any of the universities, so I can't speak with certainty. What I can speak to is that each university has their own process. MAC, I know because I've been a clinical instructor as well as an assistant in the classroom at MAC's program. They do look at GPA. That's how you get into their interview process, is on your GPA. And they would just look at your GPA and they take the top so many students, and those students would go into the interview process. So that is definitely the case for MAC. That's their only, like, that's their top requirement. However, other programs require a letter that you write, as well as volunteer experience. So all of that gets pulled in together in terms of the application. So I can't speak like definitively on what percentage your GPA counts, but I can speak to like there are different options depending. Different universities would look at different things when they look at applicants. And I did not have I had like a strong GPA, but I didn't have like a 4.0 or like a 99% GPA. At that time, Max, the program didn't exist. So they were looking at your GPA, but also like your experience, your volunteering, your work experience. I had co-ops that I could put, related therapeutic rec co-ops I could put in there. I also had related volunteering. So that was really helpful in applying as well.
Thank you.
Great. I'm wondering if you want to tell us a little bit more about like your day-to-day or some of your, like what you go through in seeing clients or home visits.
Yeah, sure. So I own my own practice. So I have obviously a lot of flexibility in what my schedule looks like. But generally a visit, so the process is that a client would come in for an assessment. We would do an assessment typically as our first step. Sometimes we would do more of like a reassessment if they've had an assessment with the school or with the children's treatment center recently. So I would be looking at past reports, as well as I would do like an intake call with the family to collect background information, as well as the child's interests and strengths. I very much take like a strength-based approach, and I think that comes from this recreation therapy background I have. So I always want to know child's strengths and interests, and I always am focusing the session on their interests. That's definitely recreation based, but also when you're working in pediatrics, you want it to be fun. And my goal is always that the child is excited to come back. And part of it is their interests, and part of it's also building a trusting, a safe, trusting environment where the child will feel comfortable coming back. I always tell students of mine that come for clinical placements that you are asking someone who is a small person with developing brain to do something that's really hard for them. You're asking them to communicate or understand or use social skills or read or write. And the thing that you are asking them to do is literally the hardest thing. And that's why they're in therapy. So we have to really be mindful of like being very respectful and very reading cues that the child is giving when you've gone like maybe pushed a little too far, knowing when to back off. So I'm always very mindful of like rapport and building trust and safety in sessions. So I would do an assessment and then I would make treatment goals. And then I would do therapy visits. Therapy visits, I mean, the length of time we support clients can vary from 2 or 3 visits to years. If I think of clients who, like autistic children who are part of my caseload, who I've support for multiple years sometimes, or clients with significant language and literacy concerns. We sometimes have the situation where a child's not talking, you get them talking, yay, but now you've realized they have significant motor speech. So they're very unclear. So now you're working on those goals. And now we've realized that they also have literacy concerns because of their language and speech delay. And so now they're in kindergarten. So now you're working on literacy. So it can vary. In terms of home visits can be very intimidating, especially to new grads. I love home visits because I think that we see our clients in their most comfortable and we see families and parents in their most comfortable. It also takes away some of the expert status where you're just sitting on the floor playing with their child in their home, and it makes parents feel a lot less nervous and much more comfortable. So I literally sit on floors most of the day. I do a lot of cross-legged sitting on the floor, playing on the floor, because I'm working in pediatrics and that's where kids are. And I play all day. It's really fun. I love pediatrics because I love supporting kids and supporting families with play and how we can use that to support communication. I was saying to my student just earlier this morning that a big role of mine is to be interpreting what I'm doing to the family so that they can understand all the subtext that's happening, because it can look like I'm just playing with their child. But I always want to be interpreting what I'm doing so that the parents can use that at home. So typical day is hard to define, but that's like a typical process with the client. Oh, I should add, there's lots of documentation as well. So I guess made it sound super exciting and fun. There's also documentation after every visit and assessment documentation as well. So that's the like less fun side of it. Mm-hmm.
Yes, charts and paperwork.
Yes,
charts and playing games.
Yes, but it's definitely part of my day and it does take a chunk of my time for sure.
Yeah, cool. It sounds like very rewarding work that you're doing when you're able to like help little people and their families and their whole kind of communication journey.
Yeah, I actually use those words a lot in my reports and also just in my communication with people, is the communication journey, because it is a journey and it's not an instant fix. Sometimes I'll even say like, I wish I had a pill that we could just, or like a vaccine. I wish it was magic, like we could just do something and it would be fixed. But therapy takes time and it takes effort, both on the child's part, the parent's part, and the SLP. So it's definitely a team effort.
Mm-hmm. What do you think benefited, like what are, from your time at Waterloo and having your degree in therapeutic rec, I kind of hinted a little bit to this, but what do you think the main benefits of having that background are to you in your job now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I've been very thoughtful about that recently, especially I think with this nature-based communication camp and starting my own business. Well, one, I'm so happy that I ended up doing a double major with recreation business, because although I don't have a business degree, I do have a little hint of like some basic business ideas. And so I have a jumping off point when I'm doing my own learning, because that's been a big learning curve for me as I've started my own business, is that yes, I'm still an SLP, but I'm also now a CEO and owner. I have to do a lot of different things than I had to when I worked for an organization. So that's been really wonderful that I even just have some reference to some of the things that I'm learning. The other piece, though, the therapeutic rec is really what's helped me as a speech language pathologist. One, I think it's a unique background to come in as an SLP. Most SLPs that I've chatted with or came in contact with or went to school with had linguistic backgrounds, lots of psychology backgrounds, some like health studies or medical sciences backgrounds. But as I said, I have not yet met a recreation therapist SLP. So hopefully two are coming, and then maybe you who are at this call will be in the field in the future, and you can call me up and we can get excited over rec things. But I think that the therapeutic rec has a big focus on clients and client focused practices, as well as like goal setting. We set goals as in TR, we set goals and we practice goal writing. So in that first year of my master's degree, when we did goal writing, it was like, it wasn't a big jump. It was something that I was already familiar with, both in class, but also in my co-op placements. I also think that focusing on the quality of life, and that is like the goal for recreation therapists, right? Quality of life. An example that was given to me in undergrad that I still remember is like a grandparent. They love interacting with their grandchildren, and they love like reading their kids' story, their grandchildren's stories. And how can we get that back for them? Because that's really meaningful to them. I think now, like when I used to work with adult clients, because I don't think I mentioned, but at Six Nations and in the private practices I worked at before that, I worked with 1-year-olds and I worked with 90-year-olds. I worked like across the age span. So when I think of some of my adult clients, like how can we get that person reading to their grandchildren? Now it's even more in my wheelhouse, because not only is it important to them from like a quality of life recreation point of view, but it's also like language and literacy based. And so I feel really excited to kind of still have that recreation mindset, but be focused on kind of the communication side of things. And then obviously now I'm doing that from a pediatric point of view, and recreation is what kids are doing. They are play-based learners. We know that. And so that is an amazing opportunity to kind of combine recreation and speech language pathology. Yeah, I also don't know if the group knows, but I've been talking a lot about speech language pathology as communication, but also swallowing disorders and swallowing therapy is within our scope as well, because the musculature and processes that we use for speech are also the same ones we use for swallowing. So within the hospital settings and adult rehab settings, especially, you find many SLPs that are working with more of like a swallowing focus. I do not do swallowing. I thought my course in my master's program was interesting, but that was about it. I haven't had any desire to pursue that as kind of a focus, but that medical side is definitely part of our scope as well.
Great, thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that, but a lot of this is new information for me. Prasad, do you have another question?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, you just mentioned swallowing courses. What other courses did you take in your master's?
Well, it's been like 11 years, so I'll try to remember. We did so I will say like MAC's program is problem-based learning. So they don't do a lot of didactic learning there. They do a lot of like group, they'll get a case study and they'll learn through doing the case study together. Well, the other programs like Western and U of T are didactic learning, so like lecture style. So I went through a program in Boston that was more didactic style. So I did have courses on specific things, but just giving you a heads up that different programs do it different ways. So we would do courses on like swallowing, voice disorders, developmental language. So kids that are developing language, both comprehension of language and production of language, articulation, phonological disorders, as well as motor speech. So all the motor side of what we say. So there's like the thinking of what we're going to say, there's the production of what we're going to say, and then there's the comprehension of what others have said. And then also courses on like special, I guess like specialties, like, or not specialties, specific disorder or learning styles. So like Down syndrome, autism spectrum disorder, language and learning differences would be kind of pieced within those, as well as so there's developmental and then there's acquired. So acquired being like thinking about things like stroke and Parkinson's and brain injury. So a language or speech or swallowing disorder that's been acquired. So looking at aphasia, which is essentially like an acquired language disorder, often happening because of stroke, as well as like I said, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and other brain injuries, other acquired. I think that's the ones I can think of right now. We also did like a counseling for speech language pathology as well. So looking at how to like empathetically support clients. And that was I don't know that every program does that, but I thought that was probably one of the most valuable courses. I still use a lot of I think in the moment I didn't think it was that valuable. And then later I realized like I still use a lot that I've learned from that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. It sounds pretty
Mhm.
interesting though, like the specialty ones you were talking about. Did you notice that it got like significantly harder in your master's? I know master's tends to be harder in general.
I think like it might have been, there's a very high expectation for your grades. But at the same time, I didn't find it was harder. I think because I was so interested in it. Like I wanted to be there and I loved soaking up all the information. So I don't think it was like overly challenging, and they want you to succeed. But I do think like in undergrad, some of the courses I had to take were not ones I wanted to take. I wasn't that interested in them. Also, I think like maturity wise, like I was older, so I really wanted to be there. And I knew I was working towards becoming a speech language pathologist. So I was working toward a specific goal. So I would say for me, it was, I don't know that it was harder. It was just different. And I was really excited to be there. So I just wanted to learn, and all the people with you want to be there. They've worked really hard to be there, and they are also trying to be a speech language pathologist. So you also have a lot of your peers will be wanting to study with you. You'll be working together, and you're all kind of in the same boat. Mhm.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I will also say, like, I don't know if you're doing co-op now in your undergrad, but in all the grad programs for SLPs, there's clinical placements. So different schools do it very differently. Like Western has an in-house clinic for your first year, and in your second year, you have community clinics or community clinical placements. MAC has all community clinical placements. So different ways of doing it, but you'll have like hands-on client experience right from the beginning. So that also makes it not feel so just academic, but you're also getting hands-on opportunities right from the beginning.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I know something that was said in a previous office hour session that we had was that in undergrad, sometimes there can seem like there's more of this competitive feeling, and how much that shifts in grad studies, and it becomes much more collaborative and more of a community of people there to support each other and help each other succeed.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Although I was like, definitely didn't have that competitive feel, but it's not a research-based master's degree. It's a course-based master's degree, but I still feel like we were all aiming for each other to succeed, and we all were having like funny clinical moments that we would share, or like, I just don't get voice disorders, who can help me? And so I found definitely like there was more support for each other. And like I said, you're all kind of in the same boat, you're all working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
So that helps. Mhm.
That's great. Any other questions? Let's see what else. Maybe Rebecca. Oh, Aisha has a question.
So I was kind of wondering, like, what are some unexpected things that you learned about SLP, or that you kind of encountered in SLP that you didn't know you would encounter like during school?
Yeah, so I will speak first to like when I got into grad school. I guess I knew that swallowing was like part of the scope, but I didn't really know what that meant. And so like having like getting to spend time, like look and look at the anatomy on a cadaver, and like being more, I guess, I don't want to say kin, but looking really carefully, like all the muscles and the nerve connections. That was like something that I don't know if it was unexpected, but I guess like the depth we went in, I didn't even, I didn't know that all that was happening. And so that actually was unexpected, but super interesting still. I would say, I think that very little as a, like a layperson, and as a layperson, as a not a speech language pathologist, we don't know, we just kind of like talk, a lot of us, we just communicate and we don't have to think about it. And so I think in a way, all of my grad program was very much like opening my eyes to how complicated it is, and all the things that are needed to have successful communication. So that was unexpected, but also really cool. And I obviously loved it. And that's why I stayed in the profession. And I would say in my profession, I've had lots of like unexpected things happen, and a lot of unexpected learning happen. I never specifically intended to be working at Six Nations or in a first in an Indigenous community. I didn't have that as like a specific goal of mine when I graduated. But I'm so glad I did, and I'm so fortunate that I was like welcomed and part of that community. So I think that that was like an unexpected opportunity that helped, like I grew a lot from, and I was really happy to be contributing to that community. The last kind of unexpected thing was how much I learned from my occupational therapy colleagues, and how they are like magical people who know everything about everything. And I feel like that was like not, they're wonderful people, so I always knew that, but like the unexpected thing was how much that interdisciplinary work influenced my practice. And I just thought of a very obvious one that I forgot, was that I actually forgot to mention, when I first went into speech pathology grad school, I had the intention of working with adults when I graduated. I wanted to work in acquired disorders. My background in therapeutic rec was working in geriatric psychiatry units, brain injury units. So that was kind of what I thought I would want to do. And my first couple of years after graduating my master's, I worked kind of across the lifespan. And here I am opening my own practice that's pediatric only. So that was like an unexpected change from when I graduated Waterloo. Yeah.
So I'm thinking of two things here, but I feel maybe you've already answered what your favorite part of your job is. And then the other thing I was going to have you share would be like your advice for these students of ours in exploring opportunities as an SLP.
Yeah, so advice, I would say, I think I already said this, but I'll say it again, is um, if you really want it, go do your research, figure out the prerequisites and get the prerequisites. You don't need to let the constraints of what the requirements on your, I don't even remember the word anymore, but like your list of requirements, don't let that hold you back. You can be creative and you can find ways to get the prerequisites. Volunteer, volunteer. Even if you plan to apply to MAC and it doesn't require volunteering, volunteer so that you can be sure that this is the right fit for you, because you want to be going into your master's like excited to be an SLP. It's going to help you through those tough studying moments when you have that goal and you're excited about that goal. So volunteer and job shadow and spend time with an SLP, definitely. And I would say those are like my two big ones. If you still have time left in your program and you have opportunities to have co-ops that you think would put you in the same kind of circles as an SLP. So for example, if you see a co-op position that you think looks interesting and it's in a rehab program and there's SLPs that work there, that would be a great opportunity, because often as a co-op student, you can ask for job shadowing with an SLP. So that was a great opportunity to still get lots of rehab experience, but also kind of have an SLP connection and job shadowing opportunity. My current student at Western that's placed with me right now, she actually, that was one of her first steps into like seeing what an SLP does. She was at a health studies student working at a co-op at a hospital in Hamilton. And she mentioned to her supervisor that she was interested maybe in being an SLP, and they got her linked with an SLP to do some job shadowing. And then she realized like, oh, I think I do want to do this. And that kind of led her down to more volunteering and that kind of thing. I will also say that the communication disorder assistant program is a college program that you need to have an undergrad degree to do it. So I do know many people who have become a speech language pathologist, but I also know many people who are interested to be still in the field, but for many reasons, maybe are choosing to go the CDA route, but you can't get into your CDA program from high school. Unlike, I believe the PTA OTA program, you can. Jen, do you know?
I'm not
feel
sure
like
about
you
that.
can't. Okay, I'm pretty sure. I thought the OTAs and PTAs I knew went into the program right from high school because it's a college program, but I do know for sure the CDA program is a post-degree diploma. So just knowing that if this is the field you want, there are lots of different possibilities.
Awesome, thank you. And Rebecca, I have your LinkedIn here. Are you okay if I share it with the group if they want to reach out to you?
You're welcome, though I'm not very active on LinkedIn. So I would actually suggest that we send my email address.
Yeah, which
I can type it in if that's
yeah,
easier.
sure, if you want to. That'd be great. One thing I always share with people is that this is the beauty of our alumni and the University of Waterloo network, and even for our students, that our alumni so often are here to offer their support and guidance, and especially in a session like this with Rebecca joining us for today to answer your questions, but they're always so kind and willing to help you further. So grab Rebecca's email, and I'm sure if you have questions in the future, you can reach out to her.
Yeah, definitely. I am so excited to whenever I meet. There's not that many Waterloo SLPs. There's a few of us, but I'm excited whenever I meet one. And it's really wonderful just being part of the process. I've been lucky to be supervising or mentoring undergrads that are going into like applying to SLP school, and it's always I get to share in the joy when they make that step. So
Mhm.
definitely excited to be part of your journeys if you want me to be as well.
That's
Yeah.
great. Are there any final questions that anyone wants to ask? We still have about 8 minutes, but not sure if we've covered everything. Okay. Well, Rebecca, do you have any final words? I know you kind of just did that, but
No, I think that we've kind of like said a lot, and if there's any
Yeah.
like specific questions, the students are welcome to connect with me.
that's great. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. Our students, Aisha, Bella, and Perses, and Rebecca, thank you so much for giving your time to be here and help answer questions and share your career path with us. We appreciate you giving your time back to the faculty.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Thank you.
yeah, that's great. I was just gonna say that everyone will get an email with a survey after the session. So if you can probably only takes you 30 seconds, maybe a minute to choose what emoji you'd like to rank the session and just share any comments you have from what you got out of today. We'd appreciate your feedback. But otherwise, thank you all for being here and have a great afternoon.
Thank you guys.
And Rebecca, you can hang on for a minute.
Bye.
Thanks for being here. Awesome.